Welcome to Rauta's Black Metal Reviews. This time we have an MCD from Australia. This is Deadspace with their brand new release, Unveiling the Palest Truth. Now, Deadspace can't be confused with another band roughly from the same sub-genre, with a roughly same or at least similar name, Darkspace. Yes, there are similarities, and while these names might be purely coincidentally rather similar in style, they are also somewhat overlapping in the terms of music, at least when it comes to this particular release running for 23 minutes and then some. Music could be summed up as very cosmic-like black metal, but not in the vein of, say, Limp Bonigard with the drum machine and all, and going overboard with its rather symphonic takes, but more in the same way of becoming very atmospheric with its style, very space-like, dark, and also in that respect quite atmospheric. There are parts where this reminds me quite a bit of Darkspace, but there are also moments when this reminds me of American outfit Akhlys. So roughly for the same kind of audience, if you will. Of course, individual opinions might differ, but that is roughly anyway the description what I can give you of this rather good MCD. Now, before we get into detail in that, let's first take a good look on the Deadspace Metal Archive site. Founded in 2014, this band has put out quite a few releases throughout the years, even if being disbanded for a while. I mean, this looks quite hectic, if you will. I mean, looks like a typical bedroom black metal. I mean, there are plenty of releases, sometimes even more than one during one individual year. Like, there are albums basically every year, and then there are EPs, singles. Well, they are not that much of a wonder. I mean, singles are often part of an album, but still, even a live album could be fitted in after three albums and before the fourth one. So this is quite an hectic indeed if you take a look at it. Now, Unveiling the Palest Truth is here labeled as full album, so I don't know how it's gonna be for you, but I mean, technically speaking, this here is listed as full album, 5 songs, but 23 minutes as a full album. Like, really? Well, your money, your stuff and all that. So up to you whether you are not ready to put your money on this given album for this stuff. I would say if this is a full price CD, I would think twice for a couple of reasons. First of all, this length is more on what we are used to with MCDs and EPs in general. But then again, if the material is good enough for you, who I am to say, don't buy it. I mean, after all, there are albums which are like 29 minutes by Slayer's Raining Blood, for instance, and then there are EPs like The Empire or Vampire by Cradlefield, which was almost 40 minutes and still being EP. So sometimes these are weird. But let's not focus on the length, but what the material itself is during these 5 tracks. Like said, it's mostly about atmosphere, and it's the more cosmic kind, meaning this is very much on the atmospheric parts, but not in the vein of like, let's create this national romantic stuff with more melodies and flutes and whatever folky instruments you might have there. Instead, it's more about creating this rather ambient-like approach to black metal. And as such, this is more like less hyperactive ways of what, for example, what Limp Bonigard is doing. Whereas they are putting a lot of keyboards and drum machine and fast tempo, but yet maintaining somewhat cosmic approach to the music and more on the symphonic side of things. Deadspace is more like, yeah, maybe let's not get that hasty, let's not get overboard with the keyboards, and first of all, let's include real drums. Now, for me, it's really easy to pick the winner up here and say Deadspace, because I'm that kind of a dude who wants to some kind of, how to put it, modesty in the words of, like moderation maybe is the key word, what I'm using here. However, if I would say, comparing this to Akhlys, I would say, yeah, it's way darker, it's a way more horrifying beast than Deadspace. This could be the entry level stuff into that kind of world, whereas other way around, you might really feel like this is the teddy bear and that's the real grizzly bear out there. But I don't want to make too straight comparisons because sometimes it's giving a little bit too negative idea whatever given music is. After all, it doesn't always have to be that the more brutal, more aggressive or more darker stuff is the better. So it's just different approach to somewhat similar style, even though difference remain. What is worth, I guess, taking a look at is this similar artists tab, which shows you somewhat different set of artists. Like here, Advent Sorrow from Australia is given as the first spot and then Austria and so forth. But now you have to understand, this is something that isn't exactly related to Deadspace, but we're mentioning here when we're talking about similar artists. Sometimes it seems a lot of people who vote this stuff always take the bands from the same country. So, I mean, this is not maybe not the nearest ones I would compare this band to, just because they're from Australia as well, but sometimes this is exactly what's happening here. And as such, for example, Austria, well, they are definitely a little bit different type of black metal than this particular EP or full album, if you will. Nor I would even compare this to so much like Shining and Total Self-Hatred, because they're more on the depressive side of things. And while this Deadspace is here listed as depressive or black gothic metal, I don't think it applies that well to Unveiling the Palest Truth. Might be true for some previous works, not this much so much. First of all, this ain't depressive one little bit in my opinion. This is more going towards the more ambient type of black metal, and while at it being on the cosmic side of things. There's certain kind of a space-like thing. Maybe it's because of the name. I don't think so, because Deadspace could also make me think about the horror game series, which has been there way more years than this band. Maybe Deadspace is also taking me a little bit thinking of Darkspace because the similarity of names, but I don't think that's just that, because there are some parts where these bands could be really boxed in together and say, yeah, they're coming from the same tree, or at least they have some kind of a similarities that they're sharing, even if it's not maybe that intentional. Overall, I would say Unveiling the Palest Truth is pretty good of an album. But what it lacks, in my opinion, is that layer of darkness that would really, just drown me in the darkness, in the place where sinister horrors are born. And it's like this one of those horrible dungeons or cellar places which really, really drag you into the darkness and don't let you out. This is more forgiving in that sense. Also, this is not exactly, which is probably totally intentional, not very catchy or memorable. Meaning, while this is quite easy to listen to and it's kind of a humming nicely in the background, letting its tentacles lurk about and go with the darkness, it could really drag you along a little better than that. Meaning individual riffs could have more power with their tentacles, and that's not something that's, in my opinion, happening too much. Also, when it comes to production, Overall Feeling is not exactly lame, but it's not that much poisonous. It's not that overwhelming as I kind of wanted it to be. Same applies to the vocals. They are maybe a little bit held back versus what they really could be. But like I said, there is a fan for every kind of music, and that doesn't mean that I don't find this as compelling than, say, Akhlys, for example, or Darkspace. That doesn't mean that you might not find this better. Quite the contrary, you might feel like this is definitely your cup of tea rather than the ones I'm mentioning. These are all coming down to personal preferences and all that stuff. So overall, I would say Deadspace has released quite an interesting release, and whether it's a full album or EP, MCD, whatever, I think that doesn't really matter in the world of streaming services. When we are, however, talking about physical products, that might be the thing, whether you're not ready to pay full price for a CD that might be seen as a EP. But that's all just money. So whether or not you're ready or not, it depends totally on your personal preferences, what kind of music you like and all that stuff. And I would say I would rather see you giving this band a chance. So I encourage you to check out Deadspace music yourself and then figure out whether or not this is your cup of tea worth buying or just streaming. Now, off you go, and I hope you like these Aussie bastards. Interesting band nonetheless, and that's what matters. Take care, stay metal.